Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Wednesday, April 26th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. On this episode, we discuss Jarred Kelenic putting it all together. Took a little longer than some people hoped, but we'll dig into what has helped Kelenic sort of find his stride here in 2023. We'll talk about the still puzzling demotion of Taj Bradley and investigate whether there might be some bigger issues in play that go beyond Taj Bradley that maybe need to be ironed out. And we're going to take a look at some velo improvers. Plus, we've got the debut of Tanner Bybee that's about to happen. Guardians promoted one of their other pitching prospects from AA to AAA. Got a couple mailbag questions, so tons of ground to cover. We begin today with Jarred Kelenic, who is on exactly 0 of my teams. And it's not because I didn't believe in Jarred Kelenic, but it's because I just didn't think that the payoff was going to be a significant one this year. I thought a high strikeout, some power, some speed, in and out of the lineup because of the lefty factor, all those things. Okay, I'll just wait and see. I'll wait until he does put it together and then decide what I'm going to do with him at a higher price in 2024. So far through 21 games, that looks like a mistake. 342, 395, 726. How about 7 homers and 3 steals? 3 for 3 now as a base stealer this season. It really looks like everything is falling into place, and he's doing it with an improved K rate, 24.7%. The best strikeout rate we've seen from him in the parts of 3 seasons he's now been in Seattle.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting to me is that there's not actually a large change in his swing rates, in terms of he swung 47% of the time before, and he's swinging 46% of the time now. He's swung 66% of the time at strikes before, and he's swinging 66% of the strikes now. A little bit fewer swings pitches outside the zone, but there's no real big difference there. And then you look at his pull rates, there's some difference there. And, yes, his barrel rates are up, but his, he had good barrel rates before. So, you're kind of looking at this, and to me, almost if you took the walk and strikeout rates and you put them back in 2021 on his debut, you'd be like, yep, that's what we expected. And that kind of goes along with an interesting text interaction I had with somebody in the game where, I sent this Rosenthal piece along, and the person reacted saying, I'm not sure, there's probably some training that happened, and the piece has some great stuff about, how he trained, how he changed his stance and how he changed his swing and stuff. But this person said, I doubt there was as much training impact here as there was a psychological one of a total reset. He went to new people and he trusted the process again. And part of the process was going to a sports psychologist. And the two things that really stuck out to me were, Craig Wallenbrock in the story says, there is no perfect swing. He says on day one. And the sports psychologist says, you cannot be the perfect player. And that might be just as important as any of the mechanical things that Kelenic did, because Kelenic really was wearing it. Mm-hmm. It reminded me a little bit of Logan Gilbert his first year up, where Logan Gilbert was a little bit more like he'd come off the mound and just these shoulders would be down and just be like, oh no, this is some poor body language. And then, but Kelly was the opposite. He was like the red ass who would be punching the water cooler and just what was this expression you had about his?
Grinding the bat into dust after a strikeout, right? I mean, you could see it. Watching the body language of players is something that Ian Kahn probably does better than anybody I know. That's kind of part of his training as an actor. He can read people really well. I find it hard to do, but on the extremes, I can see when someone's pressing. Jarred Kelenic, you could see was pressing. Chris Sale, when he's punching water coolers and breaking TVs, he's not his best self above the shoulders when that's happening. It helps to have the right mindset. Yeah,
well, I'm off
absolutely no doubt,
because the Stuff Plus numbers are terrible. But but that's another reason to kind of, I don't know. Some guys then find that reset button, and in fact, I did a piece about how older players are better at coping, and how that fits with some psychological research out there about how coping mechanisms are not bad, and they're part of how we get happier as we get older, because we just know, oh, I'm going into a funk. This is I can see this one coming. This is happening. This is happening. I'm going to go out in my garden.
Yeah. You learn. Yeah.
I'm going to call a friend and go have beers. Like I need to snap out of this. And so the young players sometimes don't have that in their bag. They just don't have that coping ability, and that seems maybe as important as anything. I don't know how, like, obviously we have to bring this back to fantasy, and I don't know how to do that in a way where, like, oh, the next Kelenic is, one thing I did was just sort the Fangraphs leaderboard for under 24 with at least 400 plate appearances since 2015, and then reverse sort it for WRC plus, and at the very bottom you've got Lewis Brinson, who I don't think is going to break out anytime soon. But there's some names on here that just strike me as, with a reset. There's actually a couple names on here that are in the midst maybe of resetting. One that stuck out with me is Brandon Marsh, who has changed a lot of his swing metrics and a lot of the underlying stuff, and seems to be in the middle of breaking out after a pretty terrible beginning with the bat. And we've talked about Spencer Torkelson. He's on this list. But some names that struck me as maybe wanting that reset, or maybe in the midst of that reset. Scott Kingery is hitting really well in the minor leagues. Joe Adell is hitting really well in the minor leagues. Alek Thomas, I think needs it, or maybe going through it right now. Maybe one name, I don't know if I can add the sort of psychological aspect to it. I don't know that these guys are really struggling through it every day. But I still have some love for Luis Garcia, because his max EV is all right. His barrel rates show potential. He had a 7.5 last year. If he could get that up to 8 or 9 or 10, he could really break out, because he has a lot of contact ability. So Luis Garcia is someone who, right now still struggling, but not out of that window, right, of where, there could be a breakout.
Yeah, I'm looking back. It's a funny leaderboard, because if you cut it off at age 24, you get some players who are no longer in this age range, who used to struggle and are good now. Dansby Swanson, early in his career, over 1,000 plate appearances, had a 75 WRC plus in his early 20s. And look at the player he became.
Byron Buxton, 77.
Yeah, and this just comes back to what I hear all the time when we're talking about prospects, is that player development and prospect growth it's not linear. But I think looking at Kelenic, it was the first time, the major leagues were the first time that he played baseball in his life, and it wasn't easy. He wasn't perfect for the first time in baseball, whereas most of his life prior to making it to the big leagues, he was the best player on the field, and he could do everything and anything he wanted to do on the field. I feel like this is a thing that teams are much better at understanding today versus 20 years ago, and even more so than longer. The further in the past you go, the less sympathy you would have found around the game for players that, if they were having any sort of mental struggles or coping issues,
grab some pine meat.
Right. The whole attitude towards this was very different a long time ago, and there's still plenty of room for improvement. You're 100% right. There's absolutely no reason to look at a list of young players who are underperforming and assume that that's the case with all of them. But it's certainly the kind of thing that teams should be prepared for as players reach whatever level it is. It might be AA for some guys, it might be high A for some guys, it could be AAA for some guys. You're going to hit a wall eventually, almost certainly. There are so few players who are just amazing until they're 35 years old and then start to decline, that you should expect almost everyone to go through it. And some people handle it well on their own. They can figure it out. Some people don't. It doesn't matter if you can't figure it out on your own. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means there's something there that you need some assistance with. And it seems like in Kelenic's case, it's unlocked. What's wild here, Joe Adell is a little younger than Jarred Kelenic. And if I asked you, how many plate appearances in the big leagues does Joe Adell actually have so far? What would your guess be?
I'm not looking at it currently, but it has to be more than 400 because he made my
Made
list.
the filter, yeah.
But I would say not that many more. Maybe 440 or something.
557.
That's not even a full season.
Not even a full season. And one thing I've always wondered about is for the players that get to the big leagues as young as Adell did and as young as Kelenic did, how much does that ruin our expectations for when to give up on them? When to say, oh, the ceiling we thought they had isn't quite what it was. Like whatever the adjustment needs to be, he's age appropriate at AAA right now as a 24-year-old, right? He's not too old for AAA. He's age appropriate to debut this year, and he's already racked up all of those plate appearances. Even though the results haven't been great, that experience is still worth something. This is the best production we've seen from him so far at AAA through 22 games this season. All of that should be exciting. And maybe that's just a way of asking, okay, so if we're going to lower the ceiling, how much do we really have to lower it when he's still 24 years old and still, if he had never played in the big leagues, as I've said many times before about certain players, we'd probably be really excited about this profile.
Yeah. The Adell has a flaw that is pretty obvious, and anytime you look at him, is the strikeout rate. I did have an interesting conversation with someone who worked with Logan O'Hoppe in after rookie and A-ball. Low A, Logan O'Hoppe had a 28% strikeout rate. And after that, in 2020, he spent 2020 training for contact. And he came back with an 18% strikeout rate in high A and kept that low strikeout rate all the way through his debut season in the majors. That fascinates me because I also heard recently that the Guardians, train for contact. Not only do they draft for contact, but that they train for contact. Well, that makes sense because the Guardians lead the league in strikeout rate, in terms of being good at it as batters. So, I would be very interested if I heard that Joe Adell was working with someone new. That's the sort of thing I'm looking to hear, along with like the Jarred Kelenic thing. It's like, he's revamped, and if I saw a change in swing strike rate, I'd be interested. In terms of guys who are in the major leagues that don't seem to have as obvious a flaw that I think could still break out, Alek Thomas is the name I really would like to highlight here. He has a 9% barrel rate, 110 max EV. It's not amazing max EV, so it's not amazing raw power. But if he can have a 9 or 10% barrel rate and, live at a 111, 112 max EV, that's definitely someone who can hit 25 homers in a season, If you got a guy who can hit 20 to 25 homers, he obviously has speed. He has pretty good contact, and the walk rates have gone up and down. There's a potential here for a guy who could hit 275 with a 330 OBP and like a 440 slugging. And if he does that, or like even a 420 slugging, if he does that, he's going to have 25 homers and 10 to 15 steals. That's a really valuable player. So I don't know. Again, some of this is close to what he's projected for. So maybe you can't in most leagues go and get Alek Thomas for cheap, but maybe you can. Maybe you can. If this slump continues, he's hitting 188. He has 224 for his career. His batted ball stats are not amazing. And if you're looking to sell in a dynasty league, like he could be someone that you put together 2 or 3 veterans for, because you're like, hey, this is a young guy who has speed, has contact, might have batted ball oomph. Like, let me get him.
Yeah, and plays good defense too, which, as we talked about earlier in the week, can really sustain that playing time. Yeah,
and has survived at least the first round of cuts. Jake McCarthy was sent down.
I know. They've made so many changes on that roster for the D-backs, and I love it because it means they're serious about contending for this year. But McCarthy
kept
down.
Alek Thomas up.
Yeah, McCarthy down after 22 games. I know we talked about him on one of our outfield previews as someone that we weren't at least at the ADP, we weren't really interested in because we could see some flaws. I didn't see this happening. I didn't see an April demotion back to AAA for Jake McCarthy. As crowded as the situation was, I just saw him maybe falling into more of a bench role, and instead they're going to give him more volume at Reno, for at least for a little while.
But I don't really know who the beneficiary is. Is it Pavin Smith? Who's playing in the outfield?
No, he's playing first base, I think, right now.
So one of the extra shortstops? Let's see here. 2023 right field, 3 innings. That's interesting. Who is it then? Who am I missing here? I've sorted by plate appearances for the D-backs.
Wow, Alek Thomas has played a lot this year.
Is coming on, or is he in the minors?
Lewis he's been hurt already, right?
He's in the IL. He's on the IL for an illness. What is?
He played 4 games. Hasn't played since April 7th.
Oh man,
Well, here's what they've done so far. Christian Walker plays pretty much every day. Alek Thomas plays pretty much every day. Rojas plays pretty much every day. Carroll, max volume. Gurriel, max volume, right? So they have 5 guys.
Oh, so Carroll, Gurriel, Thomas
6 guys
are almost every day.
6 guys that are almost every day. Moreno behind the plate's close to that. And Perdomo at short has been pretty close to that. And then everybody else, like Longoria
can't play the outfield, but I guess that's why Pavin Smith has 3. So I think Pavin Smith might be the 4th outfielder. That's all I'm saying. Is I'm looking for a 4th outfielder because they just demoted one.
They're just using him as the big side platoon DH right now.
Pavin Smith?
Yep. Occasionally plays first base, but first base and DH.
So then does Rojas have any outfield on him?
I don't think I've seen him out there yet. I think they play him almost entirely at third. Yep, he's played only at third so far. At least for starts. Maybe he started 1 game at second.
Maybe Kyle Lewis is headed to her IL for his back rehab, and then he can be DH/4th outfielder.
And with those legs, I worry he's not going to be much of an option in the outfield. But
it's a little weird then, right? Who's their 4th outfielder?
They got a few guys that could sneak out there. Gurriel plays out there sometimes. That's kind of part of it, right? They move a couple of guys in out of the DH spot, so you get Gurriel in left. Corbin Carroll plays left.
I had Gurriel as one of the 3. Carroll, Gurriel, Thomas.
Yeah.
So who's the 4th?
We don't know yet.
Ketel Marte playing out there?
Nope. They just made this move. They haven't shown us anything yet.
Right.
And the depth chart for clarity. I think they can use Smith out there. They just haven't done it yet. They can use Marte out there. They just haven't done it yet.
Yeah. Well, that's something to watch at least.
Yeah.
But it's at least at the very least it's a vote of confidence for Alek Thomas.
It is. It absolutely is. Speaking of demotions, this broke during the show on Tuesday. Taj Bradley, it's been 24 hours now. Option to AAA Durham. If you are like me and you're like Eno and you spent a good chunk of your fab budget to get Taj Bradley, assuming that he was going to be up and up for good and contributing at a high level, you were right about the second part. You were just wrong, at least for now, about the first part. And I've thought about this some more, and it still doesn't make a lot of sense. The story about it that Mark Topkin wrote for the Tampa Bay Times or the St. Petersburg Times, the paper down in that area, it's pointing to this idea that the Rays are still trying to transition Taj Bradley from pitching on every 6th day to every 5th day, which is strange. They didn't have to do this with Shane McClanahan because in 2021, when McClanahan debuted, he wasn't pitching in the minors. He was at the alternate site that year. And then he came up and joined the rotation and stayed up for good. So I thought that they would just let him stay up like McClanahan did. But that's the one wrinkle that makes it a little bit different. If you look at the schedule, it has been every 6th day for Bradley pitching so far this year. I'm just surprised there's not another way. Yanni Chirinos looks like he's going to get a chance, and he's finally healthy. It's good to see that. But when you think about the process of sending Bradley down and changing the schedule, how long can it take to get him working every 5th day? Clearly, they have to shuffle some things around at Durham and maybe do some bullpen games or mess around with things. If they want everyone else on a every 6-day schedule and Bradley's going to go every 5th, that's a small logistical thing to work around. But how long will it take before they're comfortable throwing him every 5th day and bringing him back up to rejoin this rotation?
I mean, it can't be that long. He threw like 55 pitches in his first start in the minors, and then he threw like 67 in the second, and then he threw 80s in the majors, right?
Yeah. The workloads for Taj Bradley in those starts, even though they're all over 5 innings, like it was 78, 82, and 84 pitches. Like there was nothing concerning about that.
There's also a progression there. So even if you started that progression over from 1, he should be back in 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like even if in 5 days from now he throws 55 pitches, which seems like that could be doable. That's what he did 3 weeks ago. You know what I mean? So let's say he goes 55 pitches 5 days from now. Then in the next one he goes 67. Then he's ready for the big leagues again. So that's what I'm hoping for. I have reached out to some people in the organization, and my question was, is this sort of like a roster management thing? And the answer is not very helpful, but yeah. So I'm trying to look at like their usage of relief pitchers and look for a pattern. And, they're just really interesting because they have their major league pitchers average around 80 pitches a year. Like even Shane McClanahan had 88 in his last start. And Rasmussen even joked about it when I saw him in spring, being like, yeah, when the hook is coming, so you got to be efficient, And I do think it's related to this finding that command kind of goes after 80 pitches. So they think they maximize their starting pitchers at around 80 to 90 pitches. And none of their pitches in the last week have gone over 94. That was Rasmussen in his last start. Then you look at them in the minors, and they've got in the relief, and they've got Fairbanks, Adam Poche. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, it's Poche. Yeah.
Poche, Clevenger. Those guys are very much just that's their A squad, relief squad of like 10 to 20. None of them have done more than 19 pitches in one outing. And they're also really avoiding back-to-backs. Definitely not doing any back-to-back-to-backs and then giving them multiple days rest if they do a back-to-back. So that's their conventional bullpen. And then they have the hybrids. Kelly, Beeks, Chirinos, Fleming, Hembry's an 18-pitch guy. Cooper Criswell. So they've got these guys that do 30 to 50 pitches. They just must not. Oh, and then here's the last wrinkle. You're limited, even if your guy has an option, you're limited to optioning him down to the minor leagues 3 times in 1 year. So you pointed out that their bullpen is full of guys with options.
Yeah.
But let's say you're looking through the full year and you're saying, oh man, right now they're all well rested. Beeks is among the guys who are our volume guys. Beeks is the only guy who's done a back-to-back in the last 7 days. Fleming did 35 and has gotten 5 days of rest since. Cooper Criswell did 55. He's got 4 days of rest since. Beeks had a little bit harder schedule, but Kevin Kelly pitched 28, got 2 days off, pitched 39. So I would say maybe they're like, let's save our option on these guys until we've worked them harder, right? There's going to be a day where Beeks, throws 30, and then 2 days later we need him to throw 20 again, and then we might. I don't know if Beeks has an option, but
then you'd have to option him down because you wouldn't be able to use him, and you want to have someone that you could use a couple times in the span of a few days.
So you're like, hey, our pen's in good shape. Let's send Bradley down. Our pen's going to be in worse shape soon. So then we'll send a reliever down then. You have to think about, all these guys have options, but we only can do it 3 times. So when in the season are we going to option Kevin Kelly? You're almost forecasting, projecting when you're optioning them.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure there are more layers to this for sure than just we got to get him on a 5-day schedule. That's just what they said. That's what was reported. And that's what we're supposed to go with.
You could do that on the major league level. If you have these 37 pitch guys, you say, okay, in his next start, Bradley's going on 5 days rest, but we're going to get 60 pitches out of him at the major league level. We're going to ask less of him. Isn't that the process?
I don't have it handy because I don't know if I can even find this publicly, but Heath Hembry is this veteran that they had at Durham. Maybe there was an opt-out at the end of the month for Heath Hembry, so they had to put Heath Hembry on the roster before the end of the month. Because I'm like, why is Heath Hembry on the roster? He doesn't have options left. They added him on Tuesday. Again, this is just a guess. This is the type of thing where you got to add him so
and Hembry was
like
dealing, and they do stuff numbers, so maybe they had great stuff numbers, but Hembry also has lost the plot in terms of he doesn't know where the plate is anymore. So maybe they brought him up to the major level to give him a stint, and then they're gonna say, "Sorry, Hembry, you can't find the plate. Thanks for trying it out with us."
Yeah, I mean, look, there's any number of reasons that they could have done this way. I'm holding Taj Bradley, same as I said yesterday. Going to wait a couple of weeks and see how this plays out. I think he showed us enough talent-wise. You knew going into it, at least I think everyone knew, that workload wasn't going to be 6 or 7 innings on a regular basis. It was going to be shorter starts, but the expectation,
be an innings horse or a wins horse or any of that.
But it was fine so far. 3 for 3 in terms of wins, great ratios, and more than a K per inning. If you're gonna go short, that's perfect.
Even had a bad inning in one of his starts and rallied.
Yeah, he was doing everything he needed to do to justify 20-30% of the fab budgets that were thrown in his direction.
Definitely holding.
Yeah, definitely a hold there. My other thought on this too, though, is that and I don't know if it has anything to do with Bradley specifically, but I think the way the minor league schedule is built, Monday's a travel day now, right? This is good. They've reduced travel in the minor leagues. You play the same team all week long for 6 straight games. And a lot of teams, I think, do use larger rotations in the minor leagues. But wouldn't you think for the sake of an arm care routine, you wouldn't want guys like Bradley working every 6th day? Wouldn't you want them to get into the habit of rest and recovery and between starts maintenance to be on that every 5th day schedule so you don't hit this extra last phase of development? Unless you've got some compelling research that shows at a younger age the extra rest is more likely to give you a better long-term health outcome. Even that seems like a study that would be pretty noisy. So isn't it just strange that the schedules don't sync up a little better with how big league rosters are managed?
The Rays just have an entirely different philosophy where they're just like, we are cool with 80 pitches. So we actually want our major leaguers, to get to the major leagues, our minor leaguers to get to the major leagues with 80 pitches if they're a starter, right? I did remember that Kyle Bodie took immense pride in the fact that his starting pitchers with the Reds came to the major leagues ready to throw 100. Hunter Green, literally 100 on the radar, but also 100 pitches. So, there's this whole thing where you don't want to waste their bullets in the minors.
Right. But they're doing that right now. They just set them back down.
Right. But you do want them to get to the big leagues and be ready to do what they, there's also a real question in some organizations about when to start certain things. So if you've got a 16, I don't know, 16's pushing it, but if you got a 17-year-old in rookie ball, right? And you've got this organizational philosophy, everybody who has an 85%, spin efficiency, we're going to teach them the sinker, the cutter, and the sweeper. That's something that the Yankees and Marlins are doing. The Yankees and Mariners are doing. Teach everyone the sweeper, especially if they're 85% spin efficiency. And do you want to do that with the 17-year-old rookie ball? Or do you want to give a more generalized plan and allow that 17-year-old to possibly go in any direction?
I think you'd want to leave the door open.
Yeah. So if you want to leave the door open, then you're going to have less specialized instruction. You're just going to be like, hey, let's all swing harder. Let's all try to throw 4 seamers with ride, and let's all try to throw 5 pitches. And so you're a little bit more just like, let's see where you could be. And then as you get older, you start being sort of specialized, pushed towards certain roles. Oh, you're a reliever now. Oh, no, you're a cutter sinker guy. You know what I mean? Like, and then you start specializing the instruction for them, because you can also see the finish line and be like, oh, you're in Double-A. and you can't find the zone. It's interesting. Luis Medina just came up for the A's, and he's got a power fastball, power breaking ball, and a changeup, and terrible command. Like one of the worst location numbers in my AAA sample, and terrible command grades, terrible walk rates, just terrible command. And I think a different organization, like if he was with the Yankees, he'd be in their pen right now. You know, so there's like this relationship between what the major league team needs and how old the player is and how competitive the major league team is and how much upside you think they have. So every organization has a little bit different secret sauce when it comes to that. The Rays, it is a little bit weird to kind of, I would say that I don't believe them at face value that this is all just about getting him on the 5-day schedule, because they have such a cohesive sort of meshing between their minors and majors.
Right. It's almost, that's what a that's what a bad organization would actually be doing. Oh wait, we didn't plan for this. Like,
yeah. Oh shoot, he can't just do 6-day all year.
Right. Like that might be a thing he does while he's down. He might go to a 5-day-a-week schedule or something while he's at Durham, but I don't think that is the reason they sent him down. I'm not buying that, at least.
Yeah.
We got a question that actually comes into play here. It's a question about command. It was emailed into us by Jack. Jack wants to know, are there tools that teams use during the game beyond eyeballs to monitor command? How many pitches in a game situation does it take to know that command has declined? Thinking about this in the context of the Rays, using their starters a bit less, staying in that 80 to 85 range for the most part. That's maybe something they've noticed, is that command wanes or health outcomes change. There might be some other factors in there too, but just for the command aspect of it, what are teams looking at within a start?
I think that even something like Location Plus, which looks at locations, can tell us that generally command falls off at 80 pitches. So there's definitely teams that are aware of the sort of 80 pitch threshold. But I don't think they're actually looking at the pitcher-specific Location Plus, because that's not found to be very sticky in small samples. What we do know is that Josh Kalk, who works with the Twins now, before he went in and worked for the Rays, one of the things he did was had an injury finder where he had release point data and velo data and movement data. And with those, he could say, red flag, something's happening here. The release point's shaky. Something's happening. And I did ask a major league GM once that if he could get information to the dugout about, like, hey, pull this guy. Because it was like, when everyone's getting pulled during no-hitter bids.
Yep.
And they said yes. And so there can be communication between people who are monitoring this sort of stuff and the manager. Because it's a little bit hard to be like just like watching, be like, oh yeah, his release point dropped, 2 inches on that one, but that might be meaningful in your model. So I think right now, if the question is like, are they monitoring command and taking people out when their command goes? I think that's an eye test thing, but they are aware of the 80 pitch threshold in some organizations, and they probably also are aware of some mechanical changes in some situations. But with Logan Webb last year, the release point was dropping, and I was like, is this injury? Like, what's going on here? Is anybody aware of this? And I did talk to somebody, and they were like, yeah, it's just a young pitcher throwing the most he'd ever thrown. Of course, there was going to be some fatigue markers. We just tried to ask him constantly how he's feeling. We tried to, give him some extra days off in the September, and we just tried to monitor it, because if you never build a guy to 200 innings, you'll never get a guy to 200 innings.
That's sort of the bigger problem I see with pitching development, is we want guys to get to this level. Maybe it's even lower than 200 now. Maybe it's 175, 180, whatever the number actually is. It just seems like the way we get there is more complicated than it needs to be, in part because of logistics. Injuries are the great equalizer, the great disruptor in this case, that just makes it hard to do exactly what you want. But I think there's still still some room for growth there.
And
Thanks.
all those markers, by the way, are only going to get better. Hawkeye just switched to 300 frame rate on its cameras. It used to have a worse frame rate than your iPhone. With 300 frame rate on 12 cameras, the hope is that it'll better delineate things. Like right now, it's not very good at the pelvis. Well, the pelvis is incredibly important. How the pelvis moves is incredibly important for hitters and pitchers. And there might, in fact, be fatigue markers in the pelvis. And so if we can better keep an eye on pitchers' pelvises, then
let's put cameras on them and computers and turn them into
right at their
little
crotch.
data points and not, let's not just stare in that direction.
Yeah, right. Also, it'd just be impossible with the eye to be like, his pelvis moved 3 milliseconds slower that time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a very precise motion capture. But yeah, you'd think about that as far as your mechanics, flying open, just missing your target. That's going to come sometimes from rotational things like that. So, I'm sure there's more to come. I also think that the catcher knows. Catchers are almost as good as computers back there. I think when something's not right with a pitcher, they're going to see it before anybody else does because they get the best view. They're familiar with how everything moves and comes out of a pitcher's hand. So that'd be the other factor for me is like if I'm not sure, I'm asking my catcher like, hey, what do you see right now? Like what?
Watching Little League recently, our stud pitcher last night in the win, I could tell he was like doing some stuff, and it's funny because the kids are like I feel like almost all the kids who are pitching like are hurting.
They're all hurt, yeah.
Because they're like after every pitch they're like flexing their hand and doing weird things, and I'm like, oh, is he hurt? And so like I was watching him and he was doing some of the regular stuff, but then he kept like adjusting his jersey on his shoulder, and I was like, Coach, you need to go talk to him. And then like 3 seconds later, he like called for the coach. He's like, I did something to my shoulder,
Yeah.
And so there is, I think you'll notice it's more hyper aware in the major leagues. As soon as a pitcher starts walking around the mound doing something weird with his hand, someone pops out of the dugout.
Right. Yeah, and it's usually a teammate, often a catcher that sees it. The hand shakes, the little pattern between batters changes. There's so many like body language things that
and everyone's
see
like
in each other.
It's the major league, so everyone's like so hyper focused that like you'll be like, oh, is he flat? Oh, here comes the pitching coach.
We had an email follow-up from part of our conversation on Monday. This email came from Aaron. Aaron just wanted to point out that Eric Longenhagen, who does the scouting grades over at Fangraphs, actually had a chat where he explained how he puts the hit tool grades on young players. And for younger players, the present hit tool grade doesn't mean the same thing as it does for players closer to Major League Baseball. So I think Eric said once players get to AA, that's the hit tool that he thinks the player kind of has going forward. But when you see an 18-year-old like Elijah Green or guys that were just drafted, the 20, the 25 that you see, it's a grade of how they hit right now relative to their age,
future value,
and then the future value is kind of your guide as to what they think it's going to be. So Elijah Green's like a 20 present, future 40. A future 40 is not necessarily
future
someone who's
40
not
that
good
either. So like,
it's like a slay. It's the lower end of the acceptable or normal range that you see for a
present
like
value
that.
25 guy like wouldn't be able to play in the big leagues.
No.
But a present value 40 with no power can't play in the big leagues either. So I think our point still stands, but like, yeah, it is interesting to sort of mesh that present value grade with their age and think about it that way.
Yeah. And I have the full breakdown here. I'm just going to see if I can pull it up easily, and nope, it's gone again. Of course it's gone again. Wait, there it is. Tools grade. Yeah. Teenager with poor or neutral feel to hit would be a 20. A teen with advanced feel to hit's a 25. A college age hitter with poor or neutral feel to hit is a 30. An advanced college age bat is a 35. And then
that's
hitters
a little
double A
bit
and
more
up.
regimented than I expected.
Yeah, hitters at double A and up get
so
what I actually
basically saying that like
is.
he like a teenager out of high school like wouldn't get better than a 40 present hit tool.
Right. Yeah. So for example, okay, so like Drew Jones, super polished high school hitter, right? What do you think Drew Jones has listed for his hit tool? He's got
35.
He's got a current 20, but a future 55. Jackson Holiday, 25, future 60. So so just know that when you see the 20s on teenagers, that's not this guy's not going to hit. That's not what that means. But a 20 on a guy at AA means this guy's not going to hit.
Right.
Also important to check the
2040 is different than a 2060 or 2560. So.
Yep. So thanks for that email, Aaron. Always good to clarify that. And it's very similar to what I sort of assumed, is that those 20s and 25s weren't indicative of a major problem necessarily. They were more a reflection of where a player was in terms of his current development. We got a question here from Chris about Pete Alonso, who's off to a tear so far. And it's kind of just a general question. He seems like he's getting better every year. Is there anything we missed in Pete Alonso earlier in his career or in recent years that could have pointed to the player that he has become here at his peak?
Awesome max EVs, paired with a reduction in strikeout rate over the course of his career.
Yeah, that's the part that's, I think, the surprising part. I think most of us expected Pete Alonso to always be the kind of guy that would strike out 25% of the time, because that's what he did his first 2 years in the big leagues. For his age, it didn't seem like there was going to be that much more improvement, and he's managed to cut that down. The last 2 seasons under 20%. This year he's kind of back up in that 23, 24% range right now, but he's popped 10 homers already. The power, what if Pete Alonso played in a more hitter-friendly ballpark? Would he just be a 50 home run guy every year? He's already done that once in that ballpark.
I'd also want to highlight the fact that he has oppo power, which I think is part of why he's able to cut that strikeout rate, right? It means he can do different things with different balls in different parts of the zone. He can take the ball where it's pitched. I'm trying to set up a on the fly next Pete Alonso query.
Ooh.
I'm just doing under 25 with a high K rate, looking at their oppo, I want to throw their max EV in there. I want a guy with like great raw power, and a kind of highish strikeout rate. Let's see. Jordan Walker. Jordan Walker. Jordan Walker, why not? Here's a guy with oppo power, 26% strikeout rate, 114 max EV, decent barrel rate, Nolan Gorman's on this list.
Here's a related question then. If Walker comes up on one flag, what else could you use to help validate that hypothesis? Could you look at max EVs from a month of his career? Do we need a year's worth? When would you really start to feel solid about that comp from a power perspective for Jordan Walker?
Well, if you look at Pete Alonso's max EVs, they've been great, like from day one. So I think you can do it in 1 year.
Yeah.
The other thing is that his swing strike rate is not aggressively bad, Alonso's, right? It's like league average. Let me look at that again.
There's another Pete Alonso thing.
He's sort of 10 to 11. It was 12 in his first year. So you could have someone that has like kind of a 12% swing strike rate, but I don't think that like Brandon Marsh, I just mentioned him in passing. Well, right now he's got an 8.5% swing strike rate. Brandon Marsh, 36% oppo, 110 max EV. So not quite the same max EVs, but just a whiff of a chance there. Sorry, you're saying Jarred Kelenic is here.
Yeah,
but he's a pull guy. He's a pull guy. It's not quite the same.
I was trying to think about Alonso compared to the other elite first baseman, most specifically Vlad Jr., and how we think about Vlad Jr. as kind of a top 10 player who's even been drafted earlier than that. If you go back to 2021, Alonso's got a slight edge in home runs. Vlad Jr., though, has a almost 30-point edge in batting average during that span. A few more steals for Vlad Jr.
More line drive stroke for Vlad.
Yeah, I think that'd be there's a little more I guess there's a little more hit tool with Vlad. He's a little more dynamic as a hitter, which is not taking anything away from Alonso. I think it's just giving you an idea of how unusual that level of power is with the ability to hit the ball all over the field. And Alonso's not bad at that, but Vlad Jr.'s even better at it.
I actually could see Nolan Gorman almost. So Nolan Gorman right now has a 12% whiff rate, which is what Alonso had earlier, right? Isn't he? He's a right-hander too, right?
Gorman's a lefty.
Oh, Gorman's lefty. He's got a 26% strikeout rate, and he goes to oppo field 26% of the time. So not a terrible comp. Not a terrible comp. I wonder where Gunnar Henderson is going from here.
We sweated it out with him a little bit on Monday's show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, if you want to be worried about Gunnar Henderson, be worried about Gunnar Henderson. But 12% swing strike rate is the same swing strike rate that Pete Alonso had in his rookie year. You know what I mean? Of course, Gunnar Henderson is more patient, so maybe that 12% swing strike rate is turning into more Ks than it did for Alonso. But I'm not out on Gunnar.
I mean, a 354 OBP in your first 54 games, 1/3 of a big league season, that's not bad. Doing it with non-zero power, doing it without chasing, showing some barrel ability. This seems like it's going to work, especially when you just mush together the end of last season with the beginning of this season. You give yourself a little more confidence and a more realistic expectation because you see results that are almost identical to rest of season projections. It kind of
240, 350, 406, 17 to 20 homers, 10 stolen bases. Yeah.
And you have that knowing that things could click and he could get a lot better at any time. It could happen in the second half of the season. It could happen in the last month of the season.
Or like Alonso in year 5. I think to be fair to Alonso, it's been just a progression.
Yeah, and he was never bad.
Yeah.
Never bad. I mean, as a rookie,
he hit 53 homers. Right? Yeah, it's kind of hard to take somebody. Yeah.
I know we know more now about 2019 in hindsight than we knew at the time, but even in that environment, given that he did it in that park and he was a rookie, that seems like a season that maybe wasn't appreciated enough for what it really was. True. 53 home runs as a rookie.
But otherwise, look at how nice his projection was since 2020. 120 WRC plus, 133, 143, 151.
Really steady player. Kind of a real baseball question, though. With Pete Alonso, he's still at one more year of club control. There's got to be at least some thought to an extension with the Mets. What kind of contract does Pete Alonso end up getting just from a risk? How does his profile age is the real question. I don't care so much about the number of years and number of dollars as much as I want to know, are we going to flash forward 5 years, 7 years, maybe even 10 years and still be looking at Pete Alonso as a good power hitter? Is he going to age like a Nelson Cruz? Because I imagine he'll be a DH for the bulk of his 30s, maybe at least the last half of his 30s. But I think based on how he has his approach right now, especially if his O swing can stay, if he keeps the O swing percentages down, that gives me a lot of confidence that he could do this for quite a while.
Yeah, it's interesting though that most of the other big contracts that are out there right now are not for first baseman, and one of the last sort of quote unquote bust, contracts was Albert Pujols. So the most lucrative contracts right now that are out there are Trout, Betts, Judge, Machado, Lindor, Tatis, Harper.
Even Harper has defensive value.
Yeah, he has defensive value. Stanton's 325 is the high watermark for someone with less defensive value. But even he was an outfielder at the time. I mean, to get to a first baseman, you got to get to Miguel Cabrera 248 in 2016. I think that might be, he could probably beat that. I don't know, like 250 or something. I just don't know if someone's giving him 300 million.
I think it's also quite more for years. Like how long?
Going to be.
How long do you want to believe?
Everyone's stretching it because they just don't want it to come against their luxury tax. So
10 years, 300 million or something, or 10 and 250. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he's still going to be a pretty good hitter compared to a lot of other power hitting first basemen that I've seen in my lifetime. It looks like an approach that will age reasonably well for Pete Alonso, and that's not necessarily something I would have thought of him when he came into the league, coming up with his
He
prospect
looked like
profile.
old people skills. Like, he's going to strike out a lot, walk a lot, have a low batting average, pull everything for homers. But, he did catch my eye when the fact that he's hitting oppo homers in the home run derby. It's like not many people do that.
Yeah, it's just showing off at this point. But as we've said, he was made for that. Pete Alonso was made for the modern home run derby. I've got one more question here to get to. This one comes from Braden, different Braden, not my son. He's not sending emails to the show yet, which
he will be soon.
Won't take long, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of critiques for me as a host of this podcast. But Braden would like to know what's going on with Charlie Morton. And you look at his early 2023 stuff numbers seem to indicate that he's just not quite the same guy that we've seen in recent years. You look at this overall body of work, and I'm paraphrasing the question, but the walk rate's up a little bit, 9.3%. I think that's his highest walk rate since 2016. That was his one and only year in Philadelphia. The K rate's down at 20% right now. Even last year when things weren't going well, Charlie Morton had a 28.2% K rate. So what's going on here? Is this just the aging, another year on Charlie Morton really taking its toll, or do you think this is correctable coming off of this 5-star run where he's looked like a pitcher that's even a notch below where he was last year from a skills perspective?
I mean, in terms of the stuff numbers, the biggest drop-off has been in his four-seam fastball. And it's not necessarily the most important thing for his arsenal because his sinker is still doing well and his curveball is amazing. But I think just generally over time, he's getting older and he's losing his best fastball. And, in terms of how much he's using it this year, he's still using the four seam 30% of the time. So any sort of sloughing off in how good quality that pitch is going to affect everything. He becomes closer and closer, like I said, to a Wainwright. But Wainwright was very useful into his older age, and Morton's fastball is way better than Wainwright's 80 poo. So I think he may have highish whips he has for his career, but he remains a hold for me in all formats this year.
Yeah, I'm looking back at recent years. Charlie Morton has dabbled with a cutter, and it just hasn't been a good pitch for him. At least by results, it hasn't been a good pitch. And I wonder if that might be one way he can sort of stop the problems with his fastball if he does something else with it.
Yeah, what have I got on the grades? You can do a fun thing where you can do multiple seasons on Fangraphs, and you just kind of see a person's progression over time. And the cutter in 2021 for Morton was an above average pitch. It remains a sort of 90 to 100 pitch, so it's definitely a viable option. This year, his stuff grade on the changeup is better than it's ever been, but that's a little finicky. But generally, he's not as Kenta Maeda got shelled again today. He's not as bad as sometimes the overall stuff grades has a different story to tell than the per pitch stuff. And so you might look at Charlie Morton's overall stuff grade of 113 and say, oh, he's still got it. And then you open it up and you're like, well, none of his hard pitches are over 95 stuff plus, right? At least he's not Kenta Maeda. None of his hard stuff is like over 70 stuff plus. So whatever Kenta Maeda's overall stuff plus rating is, it's softer than the one for Morton, because Morton still has a 95 stuff plus sinker, and that's actually kind of average.
He's got to be down in terms of where you'd rank him now for rest of season, and maybe he is on that Wainwright trajectory eventually. But I would say because of the velo, as you pointed out, that's the thing that gives me some hope that you can still use him. I just think you have to be a little more careful about it. I think it's more instead of last year where I was throwing Charlie Morton out there against almost anybody, kind of waiting on that bounce back. I don't think I have that level of flexibility with the matchups in which I'm comfortable starting him right now.
Okay. Don't look at his game log. We're gonna play the "Could you have avoided the landmines"
That's
game.
I'm going to predict a no on this one already. But okay,
Home against Miami.
easy start.
Yeah. At San Diego.
That was before Tatis came back from a suspension, and that ballpark. Yeah, he might have been in. I would say there's in a 15 teamer, he was definitely in, and a 12, he may have still been in my lineup for that.
San Diego at home. Does that change it?
In Atlanta,
Yeah.
slightly less likely to use him there, but still probably in.
At Kansas City.
In.
At St. Louis.
In.
Well, congratulations. You own all of his 2.76 ERA.
I got the bad whip too. Is he got a 140 whip?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a category.
The command is the walks are up a little bit.
He started the year, at least the last set of rankings you had on the site at the end of March, he was your 40th ranked starter. I'm guessing even with the injuries ahead of him, he still probably slips a little bit off of that, right? There's got to be a few guys that were behind him. Like Luis Garcia was behind him before. You'd probably take Luis Garcia over Charlie Morton for the rest of the season.
Oh, I don't know. Luis Garcia's a sneaky bad fastball guy. He's really just going to the cutter more and becoming a junker baller.
Yeah. Kind of glad in some long-term leagues I moved away from Luis Garcia during the winter.
It's his dynasty value is below his this year value, I believe.
For sure. Joe Ryan. Whoa, yeah, Joe Ryan's got to be a big stock up guy based on what he's done this year.
Oh, so rankings are coming out this Friday. I won't be able to join the cast or chat because I'm headed down to LA. But the rankings this week that are coming out will have rest of season projections.
Hey,
from our friend Jordan Rosenblum, and I think that'll be key to taking all this information and wrapping it up into a regression system to get a better idea of what rest of season ERA projections look like. And I will be really interested in the Charlie Morton number because park factors do play a factor, especially for a guy who pitches in a launching pad. I mean, it's not the launching pad, but it's one of them. It is a place that gives up more homers.
Oh, you know who else is up this year? He had in this range. Pablo Lopez. He's way up.
And last second inclusion of the velo leaders, the velo adding leaders last year to this year. Sean Manaea, number 1 is from my column today. Sean Manaea, number 1. He's still having trouble getting into games. The Giants are playing games.
What are you doing, Giants? Why are you this way?
Well, I guess the Cardinals are slug lefties pretty hard. Freddie Peralta, he's healthy. Yay, everyone party. Reed Detmers, we knew about. Pablo Lopez, the 4th biggest increase in fastball velo, up to 95. Dean Kramer's on there. I cut the list off here. The bonus for you podcast listeners: Wade Miley, Joey Wentz. I don't care really. Sorry. Michael Kopech, Nick Pivetta, Framber Valdez, and Hayden Wesnenski rounds out the top 10. So there you have it.
All right. New rankings coming. If you want to see the new rankings, you will need a subscription to The Athletic. So you should get one for $1 a month for the first year at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels.
Through 6 strikeouts, 1 walk, 1 ball hit remotely well.
He's
no
going to
fastball
be filthy,
control.
Man.
Interesting update.
I think he was underranked on some prospect lists, and I'm sure with this start, it's not going to be reflected in the bidding. There's going to be splashy Taj Bradley type bids on Bybee this weekend, but
yeah, it'll be tough because you just spent money on Logan Allen. Oh no, Allen actually will only join a lot of pools this week too.
Yeah,
so you're going to have split money on Allen and Bybee, and then then there'll be all the podcasts all week, including ours. We've already done this, but we'll be talking about who will be starting in that. And I continue to think that, as we said before, even with Savali and McKenzie healthy, Plesac and Quantrill are soft entries into that rotation. And so I would say Bieber, Savali, McKenzie are in there, and then you can still have Allen and and Bybee in there. But it will get interesting when Savali and McKenzie are both healthy. They may get sent down again just because it's not like the Guardians are going to release Cal Quantrill. Please, Zach, I don't know.
They could be done with him. They could be.
They could be done with him. I mean, he has options left, but he hasn't been that good. Maybe by sort of DFAing him, they could spur a low-level trade with somebody.
Right. Yeah, I think it's more like that where, I mean, they can option him down. He's got enough service time. He's got 3 years of service time, though. He's got to be close to that threshold where he could refuse the assignment.
Yeah, I don't know. It's and like send him to the bullpen, see if he can throw 94 again.
Yeah, there's a few ways that could go, but and Cody Morris maybe eventually gets healthy too. He could be a part of this, but it almost looks like Morris, because of all the time he's missing, is going to have a hard time working like a regular starter.
Building back up, yeah.
Yeah, they're going to use him probably in multiple inning stints out of the bullpen for a while, which makes it frustrating from a fantasy perspective, but could be really good for them as a glue guy that just comes in and mows down 4, 5, 6 hitters at a time. That could be a really nice addition for them.
Building
health
a
permitting.
1-0 team in Cleveland.
Yeah, go get some more bats, please. Oh, I mean, it's that right field spot as always. And they tried to add Josh Bell, and so far he hasn't hit that much. He'll probably come back around, but there's still at least one bat too light compared to other playoff teams.
I'm about to cut Josh Bell in auto.
Bo Naylor. Promote Bo Naylor. He's tearing up AAA. Let Bo Naylor play.
You leave my Mike Zunino alone.
Rely on Mike Zunino.
My one share in AL labor. No, I don't care that much.
yeah, you're gonna be okay. Let's let everyone have Bo Naylor available instead of me having Mike Zunino in AL labor. On that note, we are going to sign off. If you got the time, give us a follow on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscription button on the channel, hit the like button on this video. You can find Eno on Twitter at Eno Saris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.